What is up, everybody? Welcome back here to the Quarters Podcast. We're the NFL Draft Podcast, bringing you all kinds of rankings, draft talk, all of the above here. And we're talking running backs today. We're looking at the 2025 class. It is loaded. The position is a lot of fun. You could go to 10 guys like we're doing today. We're going to go through our top 10 consensus rankings right now in February. Still a lot of time out there to kind of go through these guys with the combine coming up. But we want to give you guys some content out there in terms of the guys that we like right now. And then Christian just put 15 on the sheet because that's just what Christian does. He just adds as many guys as he can to talk about. That way, if he hits one, he can put it out there and blue sky skeet it. And just talk about how he was the first one out there. So we're going to get our top 10 list. We're going to do some profiles. We're going to talk about some guys there. So if you like the draft, the NFL season is over now. Now as you're diving into what is your team needs, this is a perfect time to start getting to know some of these guys. And of course, if you play fantasy football, you're going to want to know these guys for your fantasy drafts as well. So stick with us. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like and subscribe button. If you're on the podcast, we appreciate you too. All right. So, like we did last week with the quarterbacks, we're going to be talking about the running backs, giving you our top 10 list. We're going to start at 10 and work our way up. Across the board at 10, so I will say this, the top of our board looks pretty similar, the top three for sure. And then once you start getting down there, it's basically pick your poison of what you like the best and what you don't like. I know Randy loves his pass blocking running backs. He's all about that. Christian loves his production grade guys. So we're going to be looking at all these things and looking at kind of what we like and what we don't like in terms of these prospects. But let's start at 10. So I have RJ Harvey, UCF running back at my 10. Randy has Cam Scatabo at 10, and then Devin Neal hater. Christian Williams has Devin Neal there at 10 there. We're going to start with Scatabo, though. So that's the highest of anybody here on this show. The Arizona State running back that had a phenomenal year this year, almost 300 attempts, 1,700 yards rushing, 21 touchdowns. He's been a cult favorite now. The next Peyton Hillis is what I keep hearing out there. Randy, you have him the highest. What do you like about him?
Yeah, I mean, there's the competitive toughness and everything like that, but he came up big in the big moments. Even against a tough defense there in Texas, he played really well. I do like his blocking. I think he's just always going to be a guy that is going to work hard for it and be out there. I do think he has a 3-down capability, and that's big for me as well. His hand's really good. Route running is better than expected for a guy his size. Not the best athlete overall. I think with testing that'll prove the same thing. I do think he shows good vision, good, okay footwork, I'd say, but patience and elusiveness, especially, in a phone booth. I think he does a good job with his power or a little bit of movement and wiggle. I think he does a good job. He just doesn't have that long speed or footwork. I think all of us are really looking for a top and elite back, but his contact balance is up there with the best of this class. And I think he just makes plays. I think he is going to be a guy easily drafted and, like you said, become a cult favorite for a lot of people. There's a lot of coaches and coaching staffs already that people are going to link him to. I think he probably goes to one of those. I think he gives you valuable snaps and will be in the league for a long time because he does everything at a bigger size. I do think he'll be, worst case, a utility fullback that does a lot of good things and makes a lot of good plays for a team. But I do have him as a potential NFL starter and a third-round grade, roughly. Our round grade system is a little rough, I'd say, because that's not really what we focus on. But I do think he probably goes late day 2 or early day 3.
Yeah, I have him down at RB 15. But like in this class, that's about the same range, right? Like we've talked about it quite a bit, but there's a ton of backs that kind of group together. Once you get past even really like the top 3 or 4, which we'll talk about later today, he's going to run a 4.6 40. So that might limit where he goes in the draft. But I do think you're right, Randy, that I think there's also a role for him on some level, whether he's just a short yardage back that's going to fight for extra yards or, he can catch the football. We saw that in the playoffs. I think that was a big part of his game. So I think, I thought I was going to be a little bit lower on him. I don't think he's gonna blow anyone away as far as like any workouts. I think, you know, you might hope that he benches and puts up a big bench number or something like that at the combine, because that's the type of running back that he is. I like, you know, I think his outlook could be as like a Kyle Juszczyk type of player, where he can be an impact player in different ways. That said, I think there are too many running backs for me in this class that I think are actually like really good running backs or really good potential running backs at the NFL level. That it does prevent him from getting any higher for me. But good player that had a really nice career. I think there's a chance that he doesn't test at all, because I can't imagine his testing helping him any.
He's just, his pro day is just gonna be him on a sled and just punching bags and then running hook routes and post routes and flags and everything, just showing everything out, throwing passes 50 yards that shouldn't be completed. You know, it's just really fun. You know, obviously, I think people are already penciling him in for the Titans or the Patriots. You know, just places where he could go in and be a complimentary back. And then I do think coaching staff wise, I do think they could really fit the culture that they're trying to build, especially the Patriots. Obviously, with Vrabel, they've already said they're bringing a fullback back and trying to adapt this. Why not get a guy that does everything for you?
The thing that is, before we move on to 9 for me for Cam Scatterbo, like the thing that's interesting, because I don't see this a ton when you're looking at PFF grades or just PFF numbers. He has 102 missed tackles for us this year, that's incredible. But his 10+ explosive yard runs is 45. So he's breaking a lot of tackles, but those have not led to big plays. So like that's one of those things where you're talking about athleticism. You're gonna be talking about kind of like what Christian's talking about with the testing. Just something to note. Like usually you see those numbers pretty close together, or a little bit more for the explosive runs. And that's not his game, but that's okay. Like we get into it. I have 9. So at 9, I got Jaden Blue, Texas running back. We'll talk a little bit later. Devin Neal is sitting there for Randy at 9, and then Bayshaw Tootin from Virginia Tech is Christian. He's at 9 there. A guy that I like. Tootin's one of those guys I think is going to rise up for me as well. I need to get more into it. Full disclosure, I need to go, but I know he's fast, right, Christian?
Yeah, he's a good athlete. I think his speed at the Senior Bowl. I think there was one of the days where he was the fastest, or in the top 5 fastest players, but he was definitely the fastest running back at one of the Senior Bowl days. But his game is really fun. I think he's got some nice contact balance. He weighed in at just over 210. I think he was 211. So for that weight and for that size, to have the contact balance that he does is pretty impressive. There's some inconsistencies in his game for sure. I think, you know, hands, as far as receiving goes, I don't think that he's giving you a whole lot. I think that he's capable of catching checkdowns and things like that. But as far as like footwork and patience and, you know, the things that create yards absent of a good offensive line, I think he does a lot of those things sneakily well. You'll watch, there are a lot of explosive runs on his film because of that speed and because of that burst. I think those are the two things that are going to set him into my top 10 really over some of the other guys that, you know, we can mention towards the end of like some honorable mentions that probably would be top 10 backs in most classes. But for me, I think Tootin's superpower is that he can get a few chunk runs, and he can do it in a variety of ways. So not a spectacular player by any means, but I do think that there's a chance that he could become an NFL starter. Super productive this year. His breakaway percentage was like 54%, which is like with Ashton Genty. I'm pretty sure Ashton Genty's was also 54% this year. Yards after contact per attempt was up over 4, close to 4.5. So a lot of really good things that I think analytics folks are going to like as well. But the film's pretty good. The film is pretty good. So
yeah,
I like him.
I mean, with Tootin, I mean, when you look at production too, like the over 1,000 yards on just 183 attempts. The thing too, he was at NCAA, so you know, not Division I his first 2 years. His second year, he had over 1,300 yards and 13 touchdowns. Then he transferred to Virginia Tech. He had like okay season last year, 800 yards, but then this year, now boom, another 1,000 yards. Was way more efficient, scored 15 touchdowns. So still probably pretty raw-ish. So if a team gets him, they could fall in love with that. Hey, we can kind of build around this kid. He's got pretty good hands too, from what I saw on the little bit of I saw there. Like, they can get him involved in there. Seems like a guy that can stick around on a team, right? That's why I think that he's going to rise up a little bit. And teams the buzz is out there for this kid. Like, you start hearing the teams, the scouts, and those type of guys, they really like him. At 8, I have Brashard Smith, SMU running back. I'll talk about him in a minute. RJ Harvey, UCF running back. That's where Randy's got RJ Harvey at 8. And then Dylan Sampson hater, Christian, has him at 8 as well. I'm just kidding. I don't like that ranking because I like Dylan Sampson. Ironically, not as much as Randy, because I only have him at 7.
I was just going to say, if you guys are watching on the YouTube, just compare the graphic here.
Well, listen, I don't know who that guy is. He has a hat on. I don't have a hat on. All right. So let me talk about Brashard Smith. I've talked about him enough on the show, in terms of the SMU running back that I really like. He came out and he had a really good Senior Bowl. And I think the thing I like about Smith, when you're looking at it from a production standpoint, he has that, right? This last year, he had over 1,500 yards, all-purpose yards. He had 1,300 yards rushing, 14 touchdowns, 87.0 run grade on PFF. Was really good. When you're looking at missed tackles for us, over 50. He was explosive enough. You'd like to see his elusive rating a little bit better, but his breakaway percentage at 43%. I mean, that's okay there. Very good receiver. He's a converted receiver. So he knows that. At the Senior Bowl, they mentioned, like, dude, this guy just didn't miss a beat in the receiving drills. It looked like he was out there. Well, of course he was. He's a receiver there. But the other thing they talked about was that he just kind of he shined in the interviews and all of the things that they like about him. I think from a pass blocking, he's got to improve. He had some reps, but that's going to be an area that you're looking at from a running perspective. I think coming in as a receiver, kind of converted, is something he's going to have to develop there. And his size, he did come in at 5'10", 196, which is good because that's what he was listed at. And you always get a little nervous if he's listed at something else, he doesn't come there. So if he can get to that 200 mark, maybe by the combine, if he can maybe start eating, some Snickers and getting up there a little bit, I think that'll help him. But I like him. I think he's a very solid player. I think he can be a 3-down guy, but I love his receiving capability because that to me is a skill that's going to get him on the field.
Yeah, I know Randy didn't watch enough games to rank him. Is that correct, Randy?
Yeah.
Okay.
At least confidently.
Yeah, totally fair. So my main thing with Smith is he's one of the best zone runners in this class. I think if you put him in a zone, especially outside zone scheme, I think he can excel immediately. I think you look at a ton of the teams. It's funny. This isn't the type of player that the 49ers have been drafting over the past few years, as they tried to find a complement for Christian McCaffrey.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start to look at Christian McCaffrey and what he was doing well, Brashard Smith has some of those same traits. Now, I'm not saying that he's Christian McCaffrey, but I'm saying that a team that likes to implement zone and can do it with like a smaller receiving type back, the 49ers make a ton of sense to me. I have an NFL starter grade on him. I think he's an excellent receiver, and I think that that's going to play a big role in this. When you're looking through this class, there are a lot of specialists. There are a lot of guys that, probably are just, Cam Scatterboo, for example, a really tough type of runner, not a big breakaway guy. Damian Martinez, who we can't really talk about because he did not make our top 10s, but another guy that I think is just a small, yards getter type of guy, not a whole lot of breakaway speed. You've got Travion Henderson, who's probably one of the best receiving backs. The thing about Brashard Smith is I think that he can kind of do it all. And so with him being a converted wide receiver, you can get creative with him. You can throw him in the slot. He can win that way. That's exciting to me. And that's why I have him, one spot ahead. We actually flipped Sampson and Brashard Smith here, Kevin. So
yeah.
I love this kid. I think he's going to be one of those guys that rises up a ton of boards as the pre-draft process continues. Because, man, I think he's fast too. I think that's going to be a good combine for him.
I love Denver's spot for him too. I think he'd be a very good compliment in Denver if they if they wait on him there. I think in that offense with Bo Nix, I think that would be smart for Smith. I think for me, and we'll talk about Dylan Sampson a little bit with Randy, but Dylan to me gets a little bit of a bump because of his size. I think his size. I just think that kind of shows because I think he's explosive too. So that's kind of where my tiebreaker is there with both of those guys. But speaking of Dylan, I have him at 7, so our 7 across the board. I got Dylan Sampson at 7. Randy's got Jaden Blue out of Texas, running back. Brashard Smith, that's where Christian has him. And at 6, I have Devin Neal. Randy's got Quinshon Judkins, and then Caleb Johnson comes in for Christian at 6 there. Anything of these guys you want to mention? Randy, of your guys maybe, or, in terms of Christian, maybe Caleb Johnson, because we have him in our top 5. You have him just outside the top 5.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I really like Quinshon Judkins. I think he's got one of the best film grades for me. Just production dips him down a lot. I think he can do everything that you want. I think we even saw a bit of a kind of catered performance from him from Ohio State this year, where you didn't get to see all of his tools. You just got to see what complemented best for the offense. I think we have more to see from him. There's more room for development. I think he's a good goal line back. I think he gets you all the yards you want. He's elusive. He's got bursts, decent in the receiving game. I just think he's a good overall back. And, I think in every other draft, he'd be easily top 5 for me.
He's my 11 for what it's worth, so you won't see me talking about Quinshon Judkins, which I think I should clarify that if we eliminated this production grade that we've been using for years, which, it's kind of a stupid thing to say out loud because it does impact the grades and it's important and it helps it be more translatable to success as far as projecting these guys go. But if we eliminated it, he'd be my RB5. So I do think that the film is really good. I think there's components of his game that I have always hesitated on, and that would be efficiency and the ability to run outside of a really good scheme. I think, unfortunately, we've only seen him in an Ole Miss scheme that was pretty fake, and I think really was catered to what Quinshon Judkins does best, and then an Ohio State offensive line that just kind of bullied folks for most of the year. But even in there were just so many inefficiencies in the middle of the season specifically. Now, I went back and I watched the playoff run for Quinshon Judkins, and it was good. And I know, Kevin, you have him later, so I don't want to get too deep into this. And I guess we can just talk about that. Where do you have him ranked, Kevin?
Yeah, so when you look at Judkins, for me, I had him at 4. So, and I think it's because I go back to, I think they've done a great job, like you mentioned, of him and TreVeyon Henderson kind of splitting that role a little bit. I thought the playoff run was pretty big for him. I think it was huge for TreVeyon, so that's fine. But I think the playoff run for him was big because he really kind of just was efficient, right? In that Notre Dame game, obviously the 2 touchdowns, but 11 carries, 100 yards. And you got to remember, at Ole Miss, his freshman year, he was probably the best running back in college football.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as a freshman, he was that guy that you're like, wow, this kid's there. Second year, he was great too. I mean, he had 1,100 yards. They had a bad offensive line at Ole Miss in 2023, and that he really struggled out of the gate. So he's been his production, like 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons. He had the 1,500 yards his freshman year. I mean, fantastic. And the dude scores touchdowns. So when you're looking at him, I mean, over his 3 years, 16 touchdowns, 15 touchdowns, 14 touchdowns. So that's impressive to me. If you could score touchdowns, be efficient, have over 1,000 yards. Run grade was a 90.0 this year, so he was very, very efficient on the ground. I think he's a solid back, right? I think if you plug him in, the reason why I'm in my top 5, if he gets drafted with day 2 capital, I think he could be a starter. And the only thing that kind of comes from his receiving has never been a strong point in his game. So if you're looking from a 3-down perspective, I do think he also struggles in pass blocking. So that is the one area that is probably your biggest concern with Judkins, is his receiving profile and what he does as a receiver. But from a runner, first 2 downs, he's going to be out there. He's going to be on the field, and I think he can score touchdowns in the red zone, and he could be that guy that gets those carries there. But the receiving part is probably your thing that knocks him down a little bit for some people.
Yeah, and I was going to mention that actually. That's a nice little segue. I think, as far as what goes into our production grades, target share is a big part of it because, when we're looking, especially from a fantasy football perspective, we want guys who can catch passes and be efficient doing so, maybe not just as a dump down type of option. But Quinshon reminds me a bit of, and people are going to hate this, but there's some Brian Robinson to his game where it's maybe he's an efficient between the tackles runner and maybe he can get you tough yards. But I'm not certain that that's the guy I want to hitch my wagon to as a 3-down workhorse type of back. So that also knocks him down because I think some of these other guys that are up a little higher for me, I do view as potential 3-down backs. So once again, this is a great running back class. And my running back 11 this year is probably my RB 6, 5, or 6 in most years. So I don't want this to be like I hate Quinshon Judkins. It's just there's still I have a little bit of hesitation because in that playoff run, when he was so efficient, everyone was efficient. That was the best that Ohio State team had fired on. And you can't really knock him for that. But I think it's notable that Travion Henderson definitely receives more of a bump from that because, of how he handled it. I think Quinshon was awesome in that run. And I think it actually really helped him. It helped Quinshon, as far as he was probably down at 13 or 14 before that playoff run. So, but good player that I think will probably start for an NFL team maybe next year. I think he'll be a nice number 2 complimentary back to start, but he's got the size, he's got the ability to handle carries, which I think is important too.
Yeah. I buried the lead because I didn't talk about Devin Neal, and I'd like to talk about Devin Neal real quick because I was the highest on Devin Neal. Kansas running back, 5'11", 215. When you're looking at him, I don't know what else he has to do to get in the top 10. At least these two guys have him in the top 10. I see him outside the top 10, a lot of rankings out there. And I don't know why. I think, he is a 3-down back. Like, he came into college at Kansas as a very solid receiver, one of the better receiver prospects out of high school that I've seen. And he stuck at Kansas. Yeah, he should have came out last year, and I hate him for it. But hey, he came back and he still produced, right? So when you're looking at just the raw numbers, he had 3 straight 1,000 yard rushing seasons. And then he scored 16 touchdowns the last 2 years. 2 years in a row, he scored 16 touchdowns there. And he had 9 and 8. So again, he had 49 career touchdowns. He's a very, very solid back. 90.5 run grade. When you're looking at explosive runs, he has over 35. Missed tackles for us this year was kind of down, but overall in his career, especially his junior year, he had 60 last year. So when you're looking at it, he does that very well. I actually think he fits in both systems. I think he could fit in a zone run system. That's probably where he probably could do. But even gaps and other things, I think he fits in. He could check a lot of boxes for a lot of teams. That excites me too, because if he's versatile enough to play in any roster, he's going to get drafted higher, and I think he can get day 2 capital there too. And I think the thing that probably excites me the most about him is his receiving ability. Like I said, he's just a very solid receiver. He's had 2 straight 200-yard receiving seasons. He's had basically 79 career receptions, which doesn't stand out like huge, but it's not just dump offs. It's not just, hey, I'm just going to run it out and they're going to swing pass. He can learn legitimate routes. He did it in high school too. I love the weight. I love where he's at. And I think he weighed in at 220 ish at the Senior Bowl. Did he go to the Senior Bowl or the Shrine Bowl? He went to one. I don't know which one he went to. Yeah. So part of me where he got weighed in and when he went there, that's part of the stuff that I really like from a yak perspective. I think he could just be a very solid back. He's one of those guys that has a very, very safe floor to me, because I think that he can come in. He's a veteran. He's played a lot of ball at Kansas. He was healthy all 4 years for the most part. He did not get injured. So to me, just a very solid floor guy.
Yeah, he's really good, and I think solid floor really fits my grade for him a lot. He pretty much has 7 or 8s for everything. I do think he, a guy that should test, because I think he'll kind of help out his grade a little bit more. But I think his vision and patience grew with every year. I think he has continued to develop. I just think, size-wise, the contact balance for me really isn't there. And for receiving threat, third down capability, I think he's more of just a weapon in space more than a receiving threat. I do think he improved. I agree with you, but I still think we still have to see that actual true next level for me personally. But that's just to get him to that elite tier of this class. He's still better than a lot of the guys. And then, there's just little things, but, when it comes to long speed, explosiveness, burst, he's among the best in the class for a reason. He should get drafted. And again, it's a guy that should test and do well and move up boards. And I will say, the difference between Cam Scadaboo at 10 and, Quinshon Judkins is a point. And really when we're getting up to my number 4, it's 2.5 points. These guys are so close because everyone is so good that it just, obviously the Penn State guys went back to try and win a title. But I think it also helps them, be possible first rounders next year, because they get to go back and improve in a less stacked class because this is ridiculous.
Yeah. Just quickly on Neal, I think he's one of the most elusive backs in this class. He's a very quick twitch mover, and I think, like you said, Randy, he got better with being a patient runner this year, and I don't necessarily think that those two things have matched up all the way yet. So I think we still have another level of Devin Neal's game to see, because when you start to factor in how patient he is and how he lets his blocks develop with that really, fine ability to make people miss in a phone booth, then we're talking about a guy who can just average. I mean, there's some Kyron Williams to him in that regard. Now he's bigger than Kyron Williams and has a different skill set, but as far as like running between the tackles with patience and elusiveness, if you combine those, I mean, I think a lot of folks would be happy having a Kyron Williams right now. So I do like Devin Neal once again. Like Randy said, this is an elite running back class. So everyone in our top 10, like, I would want my favorite team to have all of these guys. So that's kind of where it stands. So Neal, I get it, Kevin, and I wish I was higher on him, honestly. Like I wish when I graded him out that he was in my top 5 or top 6, because I think in most classes that's exactly where he's sitting. So.
Yeah, I truly think Kansas did a disservice to him this year with how bad they were.
Yeah. They got better. The thing that always pops out when I watch Neal's tape is just no wasted movement. As soon as he cuts and goes, he's gone. Like, and there's no, like, he just goes. And so he's a lot of fun to watch. But yeah, that offense didn't do him any favors in the first half of the season. Like, they were very, very bad.
Yeah. And functional strength is something I definitely need him to improve too. Because again, I'm the blocking person. So he got a little bit of a ding there.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, let's go to our top 5. Let's talk about them, because on the top it's all the same. We'll talk. We'll get to there. But at 5 and 4, we still got some different groups here. At 5, I have Caleb Johnson, Iowa running back. Randy's got Dylan Sampson, Tennessee running back, and then Christian's got Jaden Blue. Maybe a shocker for some out there, the Texas running back there. Before we get into the shocker of Jaden Blue, let's talk about Dylan Sampson, Randy. What do you like about him? I'm a big fan as well. I know I have him at 7. Christian had him at 8, I believe. But what do you think about Dylan Sampson?
Yeah, I mean, I do want to see a little bit more continued success. A guy that kind of went from like 100 carries and like 500 yards total almost to jumping off the page with like 3 times the amount of touches and 3 times the amount of yards. A guy that truly took the opportunity this year in Tennessee and ran with it. He ran well in gap and zone, a little bit more gap attempts, forced a lot of missed tackles, 107.5 elusive rating, among one of the better. I think it's like top 12 and like 50 plus amount of the touches or something. You have to do some calculations, because if you do 80%, it's basically just Genty. So, like you have to fudge the numbers a bit and kind of amount of carries you got. But just an overall really great running back, in my opinion. 929 yards after contact. Receiving game, not all the way there. I think he gives you some okay aspects in that respect. But I just think he is one of the better athletes of this class. I think he shows pretty good vision, some good contact balance for the size. I do think the size will limit some of his upside at the next level. But I think he has the hands and the speed capability and a little bit of the route running to be a good third down back. We just need to see more touches. I just think he wasn't utilized in that role really. But footwork and patience, long speed, explosiveness, and burst, all of it well above average grades for me. I think he is truly one of the backs that could break out from this class. I just think the functional strength just isn't there. I think with the blocking, you see the effort. It's just you don't see the results because you don't have, the ass behind you. You don't have that lower leg strength for those kind of blitz pickups or just helping out with just defensive linemen, especially at an SEC level at Tennessee. It's just not there. But besides that, he's one of my best film grades, and I think he has a pretty decent production grade that just kind of catapults him just above Judkins for me. But I do still have him as that potential NFL starter tag. I just think there's some things we got to clean up, but he is very obviously a phenomenal compliment back, at least, if not a guy that's just going to take over a backfield a year or so.
Yeah. Kevin, you mentioned no wasted movements for Neal, and I think Samson's the same way, but a lot of his is lateral. So like he's consistently setting up his next move with slight little jabs. And I like that. There's just sometimes where I'm like, go, just go, dude. Like you can break that tackle. You can get through those arm tackles. I think there's a little bit of hesitation, and that's what put him down a little bit lower than some of these other guys. But man, I still love him as well. I mean, from a film grade perspective, he'd be inside my top 5 as well. I think the burst is awesome, and I think he comes out of those cuts really well. I think, long speed's okay. I think as far as there's a balance between patience and indecisiveness. I think most of the time he's patient, and I think there are times where indecisiveness can creep and hurt him. I think that's just going to come with more carries. Like Randy said, he kind of came out of nowhere. I remember watching Tennessee's week 1 game, the all 22, and I was like, man, this kid is legit. I didn't think he would declare. So it's a happy, I guess, declaration where I think we're going to get to see him develop in real time. It's just, I think it'll take some time for him to take over a backfield, which is why I have him a little bit lower. But once again, just great back. I love this running back class. I would love if the Bears had a Dylan Sampson where, he complements DeAndre Swift well when he's not making good decisions, but I think he's also better than DeAndre Swift in a lot of areas already. So,
I do think how do I want to say? He plays with a really low center of gravity and almost tries to some of the indecisive plays. It looks like he's just trying to hide. Is kind of how the best way I could say it, and I think that's where the indecisive plays go. Yeah, and I really think just some functional strength to his game would be the ability to make him a 3-down workhorse back for a team at the next level, because there's a lot of, you see the effort, you just don't, you see the drive, you see the effort, you see the intensity, but he just can't break out of a wrap tackle. Like if it's a full-fledged, like he's down. There's just nothing really you can do.
He has a strange body type too, 5'11" and just over 200. Like I eat some more Snickers, like Kevin said earlier. Like let's get that up to 210 and I'll feel a lot better about it.
He also, like, with all the elusive rating and all those missed tackles to not really in yards after contact, so to see all the wrap tackles just absolutely destroy him was kind of depressing, which is why he is a little bit lower than I think I would love to have him. But yeah, there's
you're still the highest on him.
Exactly. But I mean, there's just some things that have to be cleaned up. And 4 fumbles this year, the first time you really get the whole offense handed to you, not my favorite thing to see.
Well, let's talk about fumbles. Jaden Blue. What do you do? Top 5, Christian, with Jaden Blue. They get 7 fumbles lost this year. I think 7 was the number.
That was also a really good transition because I was just about to explain that I don't even look at fumbles, if I'm being honest. Like I just don't. It's not something that I care about because that's such a teachable, correctable thing. That said, I think I did knock Jaden Blue because it was so bad. And so, but what is so good about Jaden Blue is speed. You look at a team like, I wish the Miami Dolphins hadn't drafted 8 million running backs already, because if you could get Jaden Blue in a speed system like the Miami Dolphins like to implement, we're cooking with gas. I think this kid has a special trait, and that's, I talked about it a little bit with the quarterbacks. Like, where is the special? If you have something special, I like you a little bit more. Ironically, I talked about it with Jalen Milroe. His special trait was also speed. So I think Blue is one of those guys that when I turned on the film, I did not expect to like Jaden Blue as much as I do. But I think when you talk about, he can break off an 80-yard run at any given moment because of the speed, and he is an excellent wide receiver, or receiver out of the backfield that can win on Texas routes. He can win on go balls. He can win in ways that some of these other guys who are receiving backs can't. I think that's something that will get him on the field a little bit early. Now, fumbles, problematic. Patience, problematic. I think he wants to go because he knows he's so fast. So I think behind the line of scrimmage, he can tend to not wait for his blocks and then cause a 2-yard gain instead of what could have been a 10 to 20-yard gain. I think that's something where he's still working on it. I think he's more elusive than I anticipated for a speed guy. Normally, those guys are so straight line that it's tough to find them missing or forcing missed tackles. I think he does that pretty well. I think his footwork can get a little choppy. I don't think he's as refined as far as that goes. I think some people are going to really hate Jaden Blue. I think he's the most high variance player in this running back class, where there's a chance that he's out of the league after his rookie deal because of those things that I just mentioned as his weaknesses, or there's a chance that there's a Devon Achane level of production and I guess willingness to utilize that speed in creative ways, where Jaden Blue is like a top 12 running back in a lot of people's minds. So I have him ranked at the high end, and I'm fully aware that I could be super, super wrong on him, but it's a chance I'll take for a guy who probably runs in the 4.2s for his 40-yard dash.
Yeah, I mean, he's a special breed of like speed athlete. That's for sure. I mean, he's got like 135 attempts this year and 5 fumbles. He's like averaging a fumble every 2 games. Like, it's just not.
We don't care.
We care.
We
definitely
are going
care.
to put him through so many drills, and he's going to be so strong with the football that we forget about that. And we, I mean, boy, oh boy, I hope they have a good running back coach. That's
exactly. That's something we have to see to believe. Because he's also, 6 foot 200. He doesn't seem small, but I do see some things that I like cleaned up, and he really has like 5 starts. Like, it's a guy that if he went back, I would have been ecstatic. I think it made sense for him to come out. I think he can do a lot of great things, and I think he's easily going to get picked for everything you mentioned. I mean, the burst, the long speed is among the best in the class, if not the best. Elusiveness, 113 elusiveness grade, I believe. He's very, very good. It's just the patience, footwork, a lot of the technique stuff just isn't there simply because he hasn't had the chance to do it. And I can't give him a grade for what I hope he would become. I think that's why he's a little bit lower for me. But yeah, another guy that is going to test and just hopefully and really shoot up the boards.
Go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, I'm just saying he'd be a great compliment. I think for me, it's like, hey, he'd be a great compliment back to other guys in an offense, but he still can have value, right? Like I was listening to the Tom McShay podcast, and they had the GM for the Ravens on, and they talked about how they like to build around speed, especially the running back position. And that just caught my ear a little bit when I was thinking about Jaden Blue. Like, hey, you know what? As much as we like Ali and some of those other guys, like look what they've gotten there. Keaton Mitchell, Justice Hill. They've tried this kind of same back, and maybe they need like a scat back to Derrick Henry. And yeah, that would suck because Derrick Henry's going to get a ton of volume. But Jaden Blue's kind of ability to catch ball and with Lamar and just build speed around him, I think that's interesting. I think the Rams, Houston would be interesting. I think Pittsburgh, if they stay with Jaylen Warren, would be interesting. I know Arthur Smith is there. Ish. I don't know what the hell's going on with that team, but it would be interesting if they're there. So I don't mind it. I worry about the fumbles too a little bit. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say I don't. And he's more of a compliment. So I worry about putting a top 5 back like that or a guy like that in my top 5.
Yeah, it's fair. I mean, that's how I felt about Achane though, and Blue's like 30 pounds heavier.
But Achane had more volume in college.
He did, but he was 30 pounds lighter. So it's was that a Texas thing? To me, it was, because I can't sit here and say Quintravion Wisner is a significantly better running back than Blue. I think it was just he wasn't trusted to handle the football, and I think that's why, like I said, I don't like caring about fumbles, but I did knock him for it. So that's how significant it was. So
that's why they matter. Right there is you can be the best athlete in the world, but if you can't hang out the dang ball, you're not staying on the field.
But in a world where he does hang on to the football, I think he has an Achane level of production in college. I think that's where I'm at. And so I think if I say I can coach him, I'll grade him as if I have the best coaches in the world. And so that's where it's different. And I get it. I'm probably going to be the high person on Jaden Blue in this entire industry of draft analysts. Like I don't think that we'll see anyone that has him in their top 5. So I'll be the outlier. I welcome that. Come hate in the comments. If you think Jaden Blue sucks, tell me why.
There's a lot of what ifs in the world. Like if I didn't have integrity, I'd probably still be with my last company. But let's move on. Let's go to number 4. I had Quinshawn Judkins, Caleb Johnson there with Randy, and then Christian had RJ Harvey, another guy out there. We just listened to Christian pontificate about Jaden Blue for way too long. So I'm going to go to Caleb first. So I had Caleb at 5, Iowa running back. Some have him at 2. So some are they have Caleb Johnson pretty high there. Christian has him out just outside his top 5. Where are we leaning here with Caleb Johnson? I think we're all on the same boat here with Caleb Johnson in terms of what we're thinking about him as a running back. But Randy, where are you at?
I mean, a guy that he is like right on our cut line of NFL starters, a potential NFL starter for me. And I think it really spells out his detriments to his game. The vision, I think, should be improved by the amount of touches he's had. Hands, as a third down back, I just don't trust it as of right now. The patience really isn't there for what I expect really from this kind of offense. And then other than that, like elusiveness, I don't really love it. I gave him an average grade. Burst and long speed, I think, are almost impressed me from watching the films. It's not what I really expected going into it from watching some games live or stuff like that. Obviously, production-wise, he absolutely killed it. He's got a 10 production out of 10 for us for a reason. He was a monster. Contact balance is one of the best in the class. Even footwork, I think, is really, really good. I think he's a quality back from a good system that produces good offensive linemen, and I think it kind of is ramping up for a lot of people because they see him as just a power back that can eat up carries and move along. I think he can do that, 6 foot 225. I think he's a good back. I just don't see this otherworldly, he's right behind Genty crap. I just don't like. For me, I didn't see enough in the pass protection game to even rank it. It was like a base level. So there's just nothing besides contact balance and just workhorse, like taking a lot of carries capability. There wasn't stuff that jumped off the page to me. I just think he was a good back.
Yeah. This is a player that I'm just going to let the analytics nerds take the wheel. And I'm going to say, maybe you guys are right, because as far as film goes, he's fine. And so I think he's James Conner, but a little bit worse. James Conner has always just been a fine back where his teams will draft a back and we're like, oh, they're going to take over because James Conner is just like a modestly efficient player, and James Conner just stuck in the league and is still going to be the starter next year in Arizona and has been a really, really good productive running back for a long time. I see that as the high level path for Caleb Johnson because the film is just fine. I think there's something notable though about everyone knew that he was the offense in Iowa and everyone focused on that, and he still was able to be productive. I will say some of the stuff, like his yards per attempt being over 6, I think you can watch a game and it's similar to Genty in this way, actually, where it's like he's averaging 2 yards a carry, he's averaging 3 yards a carry, and then boom, he did break off one for 40 yards, and then his yards per attempt came up. I just, he can eat carries, and I do have a starter grade on him because I think he's going to be a starter at the NFL level. He's not one of there's some also Najee Harris to him where it's like, yeah, he's a starter, but do I really want to have my offense run through Caleb Johnson? I don't think so. But a fine back, in a group where I think there's a lot of exciting, I think he does a lot of the little things well enough to be an impact player in this class.
Yeah. Sorry, just quickly. I think he falls somewhere between the Alabama running backs of this class, like kind of thing where it's somewhere between Najee and Brian Robinson and a bit of a plotter more than a premier player for me.
When I watch him and I just kind of see him play, and it's hard because I actually talked about him being one of my favorite 3-star kids like 3 years ago. It's hilarious because I did like him. but it's
One of
just
me.
average. Like I just see average, and there's not any, but that's okay. I think he's a starter. That's why I have him in my top 5. Like I'm okay with where he's at. I just don't see the things that other people see, and I want people to go out there. I know the analytical nerds won't do it because you don't like watching football. For those of you that like watching football, if you go watch his tape a little bit, you're gonna see a lot of he does not get touched for like 8 yards because his line is so damn good, and his offensive line was that good. The thing that makes me worried is yeah, he does break some off and he does do that well. How well is he going to do when he doesn't have that great offensive line pushing guys back 3-4 yards? Can he do the little things, the separation, has that vision that I think he has really good vision, but also that vision was attainable by having those holes that were so damn wide open for him. Like, what is that going to be? And I think that's the question mark I have for him. That's why he's at my 5. That's probably my biggest thing with him. I like him. He's going to be a starter more than likely, but I don't see 2. I don't see 1. I don't see that type of a game changer there. Go ahead.
Sure as hell don't see a first-round player in
No.
a class that
No,
has the other guys that are on this list. If you're watching on YouTube and have understood who our top 3 are across the board, we were seeing that early. And I mean, shoot, even Dane Brugler put Caleb Johnson in his first-round mock to the Chiefs, and to the Chiefs, I get it, because they have an average running back room. So why not add another average player? But I just don't see a first-round player. I think this is maybe a kid who probably shouldn't even be drafted in the top 50, but before day 2's over, I think is fine. Like top 75 type deal. I think that's okay.
Yeah. No, that's fine there. All right, let's quickly touch on RJ Harvey. He's at your 4. He's higher than both of me and Randy.
Yeah, just a super explosive player. I think I watched him last year and I said, why is no one talking about this kid? I just don't understand why there was no buzz. And probably some of that carried into the grades from this year, where I think this year he was productive. Once again, he has one of our highest production scores. He has a breakaway percentage up over 50, similar to Genty and Tootin. His yards after contact are really good for a player of his stature because he's a small boy. He's a little boy. He's like 5'7", and like 5'7 3/4" or something like that. But yards per attempt, super efficient player. Once again, though, Kevin, you talked about not wanting to put complementary backs in your top 5. And I think Harvey's probably a complementary back because of that size. His contact balance for a kid who's under 210 is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think his hands are fine enough to be a third down back. But I also look at Harvey. We mentioned pre-show, Randy said the name Kenneth Walker, and I'm like, man, is that who he reminds me of? Where he does kick outside a little bit too often. I think the vision between the tackles is a little iffy, and I think he can be a little impatient in waiting for his blocks. But it's also a UCF offensive line, man. I think he's just trying to create yards because he was a lot of that offense. When he gets outside, there's just so much burst and so much explosiveness that it's really tough for me to sit here and say that kid can't play at the NFL level. So I do see some Kenneth Walker to his game. He's a little bit smaller. I think that we'll see. I didn't like Kenneth Walker for what it's worth, as far as how everyone else liked him. But I do like Harvey. I'm excited to see where he lands in the draft. He's a little older. I think that could impact his draft capital. I think there's a chance that he's a 4th-round player. I don't think he gets out of round 4, though. So I think I'm still going to be pretty all in on RJ Harvey.
He's just too small for me. I don't know. I like him, but that kind of number makes me worried. 5'7" 3/4. What are you looking at there in terms of him? He's explosive though.
Yeah, he is. I mean, like Christian said though, age, the bouncing outside, and then pass blocking is pretty much non-existent. So
yeah. That's out. Randy's out now. Pass blocking non-existent. That boy ain't seen his field.
Just saying. I mean, important. if you're pretty good hands and everything, to me, there's a workhorse ability that's going to make you a better running back in my kind of grading scale, and a guy that can't do one of the aspects is going to really get dinged.
No, that's fair.
It's fair.
All right, let's get our top three. So we have all the same top three at the top of the board. I have them. We all have Amari Hampton, North Carolina running back at 3. We have Travion Henderson, Ohio State running back at 2. We had that before all the cool kids started doing it, by the way. We've had Travion as our top 2 back, or at least in our top 3 pretty much all season. And then we have Ashton Genty at 1. Boise State running back. Everybody knows about him. Amari Hampton, to me, I'm going to talk about him, is the most disrespected 2 seasons in a row 1,500-yard rusher out there that I've probably seen in a long time. I understand that people might not love his tape, but the kid just produces, right? He had 15 straight touchdowns the last 2 seasons. He had 30 touchdowns over those 2 years. He had a 90.6 run grade both years, and that's great that you like to see there. 72 missed tackles for us this year. 45 explosive runs over 10 yards. You have to like that. And his elusive rating was pretty good. 126.8. You like to see that from a running back at his size too. 6'1", 220-ish. We'll see at the combine what he comes in at. But breakaway percentage, 44%. I don't know. I don't know what we're missing here. I mean, when I think of Amari Hampton, I would take him every single time over Caleb Johnson. And I don't really think it's close, right? And I think that people are putting Amari way too low in some of the rankings. Quick feet. I think he explodes well through the line. I think he has good vision. North-south kid, gets up and goes. Can break away too from tough defenses. You saw him in the ACC. And again, they had North Carolina had a ton of quarterback issues this last year. And that was their offense. Amari Hampton was their offense. And defenses knew that. He was still able to put over 1,600 yards essentially in that team. And the breakaway, he had a great game against Georgia Tech. He had a few great games that you saw from him overall. And that Georgia Tech game really showed out in terms of his breakaway percentage, his breakaway runs that he had. But fantastic running back. I don't know what else to say about him. I think he does a great job in between the tackles. He can be a 3-down guy. I think he can be out there. I'm not going to give him this comp because Derrick Henry is insane. He does his running style, though, reminds me a little bit of Derrick Henry, too. His ability to kind of accelerate after 10 yards. You see that acceleration more. So Amari Hampton, to me, is a pretty for sure running back 3 for me right now in this class.
Yeah. One of the things that, you mentioned how good he is between the tackles, but he hugs his blocks so damn well that, it's incredible, but he's so fast and he has so much burst doing it that it's say that defensive lineman does try to reach out and tackle him. A, he's too late because Hampton's already gone, but B, Hampton's going to blow through that arm tackle. So it's he's so tight to his blocks that he's consistently getting an extra 3 to 4 yards on these carries. There's my comp for him, and people are going to hate this and think I don't like him, but there's some David Montgomery to his game where super soft feet. I think that there is a pass catching skill set there. But I think if he is a 1A to another 1B speed back, I think you're looking at one of the better running back rooms in football, because I think he can get you 5-6 yards a carry at the NFL level because of all the things that we've talked about. He's got some of the most burst and power combination in this class. I think there's one other back in this class that you can say that about, and he's our one. But Hampton's an extra 10 pounds on Genty or something like that, 5 pounds.
Yeah.
And it sometimes shows. He'll just run through people, and he's a very, very talented back that I think has an outside shot to be a top 35 to 40 pick, right at the beginning of the second round. I think he could come off the board pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'm very consistently kind of targeting him if I'm the Raiders in the second round. If I'm looking at how the board's going to fall, it's just a guy that's going to be able to eat up carries. You've put other backs in the system that could be a little bit more pass catchers. You can draft another one, but it's a non-existent running back room really for them, and a guy that would instantly put so much of a spark on that aspect of the team that would really reevaluate the whole position for them.
Sincere McCormick erasure. Get out of here.
That's
Love
a great
that
spot
kid.
for him, though.
That's
a really good spot for him. That second round, early second round, someone's going to move up and get him. And I just don't think he's getting the love that he should. I don't know how you put Caleb ahead of him. I don't see that right now.
Yeah,
Not close.
His worst trait is his third down receiving threat for Hampton, and it's still better than Johnson's.
Yeah.
Like, what are we talking about? And then you add everything else. I think he might, testing wise, might be slightly worse of an athlete.
Yeah.
I know that's what me and Christian have so far for athleticism. Obviously, if they test, we can change that. And yeah, I think vision and patience, there's some stuff to grow with. And that was mainly because a lot of times, like Christian said, he's like just hugging to his line and then hoping to find the hole almost and burst out instead of going with how the play, like kind of sitting behind the play a little bit more. So I'd like to see that grow, but everything else is just so astounding. Like there's a lot of drafts that would be like a no-brainer first running back off the board.
Yeah, but not in this one because Travion Henderson is R2, and I am going to do what I did last episode last year. 2024. Yeah, close. I'm going to just read what I wrote about him in my top 50 big board that I dropped. So Henderson, scouts are raving about him, citing how he may not make it out of the first round in this spring's draft, and it's easy to see why. Speed, burst, and movement skills define Henderson's game. He makes every carry a potential explosive play with subtle movement, skills that create better angles, and a more challenging path to getting him on the ground. He improved significantly between the tackles in 2024, exercising more patience and confidence in his vision. As a receiver, Henderson is arguably the best back in the class. He can take a screen pass for 70 yards, see the college football playoff highlights, displays soft hands and instincts immediately after the catch, and is the best pass blocker in the last two classes at least. Henderson can create yards out of nothing, displays outstanding contact balance when healthy, and should maintain his eye-opening efficiency levels once he arrives in the NFL. NFL comparison, Aaron Jones. I think this is an immediate starter that comes in and can be a top 10 running back in the NFL, provided that you get someone who can take some of the carries away. There's some Jahmyr Gibbs to it where it's like, I would really love for him to have a complimentary back, but that'll keep him efficient. We saw it this year with Quinshon Judkins. I think that's the best outlook for Henderson. I think there's a chance we don't get that right away, but I think some team is going to be really smart and put two backs in his backfield so that Henderson can be the guy that's averaging 6-7 yards a carry. Elite player, always has been our RB2, except for when Singleton was in this class and he was my RB3 for a second.
Yeah, I mean, there was a reason him and Judkins just work so well together. A guy that can eat up some of the more short yardage and be explosive in that aspect as well, and pair with a guy who, at least, obviously not play style wise, I'd say, but kind of. I mean, he's basically a little bit faster Zeke out there for Ohio State. I'd say he rivaled Zeke for pass blocking coming out. Easily the best pass blocker in this class, night and day. So just third down all around, he's the best back I think we've seen in a long time. I think Bijan's close, but I think he's a better pass blocker than Bijan. I think Bijan's better in actual receiving game, can be a slot wide receiver for you if you need to. But it really, truly does rival that. He's easily a quality NFL starter for me, a guy that should be a first round. A couple of months ago, Kevin took him for the Chiefs at pick 31 or 32 at that time. We got a little bit of backlash for it, and it's just, since the playoffs, has been almost a no-brainer. Unfortunately, the Chiefs have so many damn needs that it doesn't really fit necessarily. It's more of a luxury pick, but hey, if there's a coach and a quarterback that can do it, it's them. But Henderson is just a guy that it excels off the page in every aspect. If he had been healthy for his entire college career, he would be rivaling one of the best running backs in Ohio State history.
Yeah, no, you guys said it all with him. I love him. I do think that there is a point to be made that he could be a very good, Gibbs-ish type guy with a running back, David Montgomery type running back there. That'd be great for him, though. And then where he can take over as a 3-down guy if needed, because I think he can, just like Gibbs can. Mm-hmm. Henderson can do that too, but it's not something that you probably want to be sustained there. You probably need him to kind of get some of that usage back and volume back to someone else in that running back room, but you're still excited about having it on your roster. All right, Randy, Ashton Genty's our one. Everybody knows Ashton Genty because we've talked about him a lot, especially everybody's really talking about him there. The numbers speak for themselves. 375 attempts this year, which is absurd. 2,595 yards rushing, 29 touchdowns. Missed tackles for us this year. He had 151 10 plus explosive runs, he had 63. When you're looking at his yards per contact per attempt, is at 5.25. Yards after contact is 1,970 yards. Elusive rating 215, and in his breakaway percentage is 52.6. So pretty damn good year. Obviously, we should have probably won the Heisman if you ask some people out there. And really, he's the one, right? There's no one that should be challenging him for one.
No, yeah, it is just so far and away the only running back that we've seen that could contend with season-wise. Barry Sanders, obviously, I think they play a very different style, so it's a little bit different there. But I mean, he 193 gap attempts, 181 zone attempts. You saw every aspect that he could play in any offense. I think he's just a complete back. I will say, obviously 2023, he was asked to be more of a receiving threat. 44 receptions, 578 yards, only 23 receptions, 138 yards this year. They just didn't really ask him to do it. And I will say, I do think when you're looking at the grades, I think I gave him a little bit of a ding on third down capability, mainly because I do think his pass blocking should be better for the amount of attempts that he's had at it. There's a lot of times where they can get a bit lazy and just throw a shoulder and then look for a check down quick, just assuming that the offense isn't going to run without him, I think. But I when you go back and look at the 2023 tape, I think I would give him probably like an 8.5 out of 10. I dropped it to an 8 because I think it did drop this year, but again, he wasn't asked to do it. Everything else is just so damn good. I mean, his long speed burst, elusiveness, like you said, is unparalleled in this class. And honestly, his patience and just vision really improved. I liked he was able to sit back there like Le'Veon sometimes. He was able to barrel through when he knew he had to. Every aspect of a running back, you really saw what you wanted from him. And I just think he can run any concepts. He can fit any team. There's so many teams this year that are absolutely desperate for a top-end running back like this. And with he's a tight, compact frame. He stayed healthy. A little bit of fumbles issues this year, a little bit of a big moment fumbles in the playoffs as well. But I think with the contact balance, trying to do too many things in the playoffs was a bad thing for him there. I think when he's in a system and feeling confident and an offense that should be kind of built around him, I think he's just going to be really, really good and always open up in the daylight and make big plays for this team, any team that takes him. There's just nothing. Trying to find knocks, I guess the elusiveness is so crazy that maybe he look to avoid hits instead of taking them head on in comparison to like a Scatabo or something like that. We're being super ticky-tacky. That's the question marks here. The dude is just absolutely astounding, an absolute workhorse. I mean, I guess maybe too many attempts, I guess you could say. But I mean, when you're trying to break a record, screw it. And, we've had a few running backs come into this league since, someone like the Monty Balls and all those that ate up the touches and didn't do well at the next level, really, that it's kind of been proven a little bit wrong. I don't see a wear and tear with him. I think he's just going to be a good back at the next level and really can fit any system. And that's something that's hard to say.
Yeah. You mentioned the Chiefs as a Henderson spot, but it's like, what if a team in the top 15 takes Genty and then the Broncos take Henderson, and then we're talking about something different in this NFL draft? I think there's a non-zero chance that happens, because I do think, we mentioned it earlier, but like really after this top three, it's open. As far as like teams will have different grades. I think the top three to me is pretty locked in and pretty far and away clear to me. Whereas you see it on even our rankings. Like there's a lot of difference in here, and there will be other guys inside teams' top 10s that just fit their scheme a little bit more. So I wouldn't be shocked if we saw two running backs go in the first round this year, with Genty going higher to a team that, not a lot of people expected the Lions to take Jahmyr Gibbs as early as they did. Sure, they may have expected them to take him in the second round that year. Not too many people were projecting him in the first, but I think we could have a similar type situation this year where it's like, yeah, that class had some running backs too, and people were like, oh, Bijan's for sure a first rounder, but we don't know if another one's going. I think we could see teams really separate out this top 2 or 3 running backs, and then the rest of the guys kind of get grouped together later.
The one thing I keep coming back to is like when I do mocks, I try to find places to put running backs in, but this defensive line class is so damn good. And what we just saw what the Eagles did and with their defensive line, I keep going back like, man, where am I gonna put that second running back at? Where's he at? And I think that's why Ashton falls down a little bit too, because I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, do the Raiders really take Ashton Genty if Shador's off the board and when they can get like a Hampton in the second round? I don't think they do, right? I think they would just go, okay, I'm gonna take the best defensive lineman here. If it's Mason Graham or it's Will Johnson at corner, or maybe they move up and they want an edge, maybe Jalen Walker or something like that, right? Something like when you're looking at these guys, Michael Williams. That's the interesting part. We'll get into those guys, but I think from the running back standpoint, you're right. I think that when you're looking at it, it's going to be fun between Genty and Henderson. If Henderson does go first and he gets that landing spot that we really like, it's going to be interesting how that plays out. But right now, yeah, Genty to me just checks every box imaginable. Like he just does. And that's what you have to like there. So that's our top 5. Those are our top 3, but I'll run through the top 5 again. I had Ashton Genty at 1, Trayvon Henderson, and Omari Hampton. All of us had that. And then at 4, I had Crenshaw and Judkins, and I had 5, I had Caleb Johnson. And then Randy had Caleb Johnson at 4, Dylan Sampson at 5, and then Christian's always the outlier in these. We love him. RJ Harvey at 4, UCF running back, and then Jaden Blue from Texas at 5. Those are our 2025 running back rankings. If you missed our quarterback show, go check it out. We talked about the quarterbacks as well, but there is a ton of depth here. I'm just going to go through for Christians because he put it on the sheet. I might as well run for him. Here's his top 15. Here's 11 through 15 for Christian. He's got Quinshaw Judkins there. 12 is Woody Marks, USC running back. I like a lot. Jordan James at 13. Jarquez Hunter out of Auburn at 14, and Cam Scatterbo at 15, like we mentioned. But we have all of our rankings. If you want all of our rankings, you go to our Patreon. You can check that out. Our Substack, we're dropping a bunch of different content on that. We're going to get Randy's rankings on our Patreon as well pretty soon. He just got to stop being so lazy. So we'll get him in there. Check out below in the description if you're watching on YouTube. We appreciate you guys. Drop your guys' rankings, where you have them. What are your top 3 guys? Are we wrong on Caleb Johnson? We're always there to participate in some discourse. Healthy discourse, though, because I will call you a dumbass on this YouTube channel if you come and disrespect us here. That's just the rules. That's how it goes. So appreciate you guys.
You're looking good now, huh, guys?
Yeah, exactly. All right, we'll see you boys, and we'll see you guys next week. We're talking wide receivers.